Across the Sahara, ancient artists carved something strange into stone: people swimming. The Cave of Swimmers in Egypt still shows it today, in the middle of the driest place on Earth. Official story: this desert was once green. But in 2025, a nature study cracked that story wide open. Two ancient mummies buried here handed scientists a result that changed the whole premise. To understand what that result means, you first have to see what the physical record actually proves and how scientists found it. The evidence for a Green Sahara isn't guesswork, it's written into the seafloor. Off the coast of Mauritania, scientists pulled a marine sediment core tracking 30,000 years of dust blown off the continent. Between roughly 14,800 and 5,500 years ago, that dust signal drops to almost nothing, meaning for nearly 10,000 years there was almost no desert to speak of. The trigger was a wobble in Earth's orbit, one that strengthened the West African monsoon and pushed rain deep into what's now the world's largest hot desert. Lake Mega Chad alone may have covered more than 150,000 square miles, by some estimates rivaling the size of the Caspian Sea. And the greening didn't end everywhere at once. It faded first in the north over Egypt, while the south stayed green for centuries longer. So the evidence for a Green Sahara is solid. What isn't settled is how it ended, and that disagreement runs right through the peer-reviewed literature. Here's the catch. One marine dust record shows an abrupt spike around 5,500 years ago, as if the desert returned within a single lifetime. But a separate lake pollen core from Chad tells a slower story, a 2,000-year decline, not a collapse. Same event, same desert, and two very different timelines. The physical evidence for a Green Sahara isn't in dispute, but exactly how it ended still is, and neither camp has backed down. Before getting to that disagreement, you need to meet the people who actually lived through this landscape, because the human record changes what the debate means.
This wasn't an empty landscape. People lived here, and they left proof everywhere you look. In southeastern Algeria, the rock walls of Tassili Niger hold more than 15,000 documented images. Elephants, giraffes, hippos, herders, and swimmers painted from around 6,000 BC onward. And that's the part that doesn't add up at first glance. A desert should have always been a desert. But these walls were painted by people swimming in water that doesn't exist here anymore. Further west, at Takarkori in Libya, archaeologists found Africa's oldest confirmed evidence of livestock farming, dating back roughly 8,000 years. At that same site, they found traces of milk processing, the oldest found anywhere on the continent, about 7,000 years old. So there were real people here, herders, swimmers, families, living in a landscape that's now completely uninhabitable. There's even a quiet debate about whether they hastened their own ending. One line of research suggests their livestock grazed the land past a tipping point, while another suggests the opposite, that herding actually slowed the decline down. Nobody's settled that argument yet. But the bigger question is what happened to these people once the land turned against them. And in 2025, two mummies buried in a rock shelter gave researchers an answer nobody was expecting. These two individuals were buried here 7,000 years ago, and their DNA said something that contradicted what most people, including most researchers, had assumed. Scientists sequenced those two individuals' DNA and found a lineage that rewrote the central assumption about what this landscape actually connected. That assumption was that the Green Sahara worked like a highway, a corridor carrying people back and forth between North and Sub-Saharan Africa. The genetics say something very different. The 2025 study didn't just confirm these people existed, it revealed they were almost a lineage on their own. Researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology sequenced the genomes of the two Takarkori individuals, and what they found was a previously unknown North African lineage distinct from sub-Saharan populations and distinct from Near Eastern ones too.
You'd expect a green corridor to carry traffic in both directions. Instead, the genetics show a population that largely stayed put and stayed separate. Genetic exchange between North and Sub-Saharan Africa during the humid period turned out to be limited, which challenges the idea of an open migration highway. This lineage may trace its divergence back roughly 50,000 years, meaning these populations likely survived even the drier periods before the Sahara turned green again. So the DNA gave us something real, a new lineage, a new level of isolation, a corridor that may not have functioned the way the textbooks described. The highway in the title may not have carried the traffic anyone assumed, and that changes what the Green Sahara actually was. But the DNA settled one question and immediately opened another. If these people were isolated, where did they go when the water ran out? The answer depends on something two credentialed research teams still can't agree on: how fast the desert actually returned. Here's where the science stops agreeing. A marine dust core off Mauritania shows an abrupt spike around 5,500 years ago. Read literally, the desert could have returned in centuries, maybe less. Another record, the Lake Yoa pollen core in Chad, tells a slower story, a gradual decline stretching from about 6,000 years ago to 2,700 years ago. 2,000 years, not 2 centuries. And the Eastern Sahara held on longer than either record alone suggests, staying humid until roughly 2,700 years ago, nearly 2 millennia after the North had already dried out. The transition crept south. It didn't happen everywhere at once. 2 records, 2 timelines, both peer-reviewed, both credible. One says the ending took less than a human lifetime. The other says it took 2,000 years. And underneath both of them sits a third open question: whether people made it happen faster. One line of research argues that grazing pushed the ecosystem past its tipping point sooner than the orbital shift alone could explain. A separate modeling study reaches the opposite read, that herding may have actually slowed the deterioration down. If scientists can't agree on how fast this ended, that matters beyond the history books. Climate models trying to predict a repeat are working from a timeline that's still disputed. The one thing both camps agree on: something pushed this ecosystem past a threshold it never recovered from. And the Eastern Sahara proves that whatever it was, it didn't arrive everywhere at once. Which brings up the question the research still hasn't answered: not just how it ended, but whether we're even measuring something that's genuinely over. So will it happen again? Almost certainly. The geological record says this isn't a one-time event. It's a repeating cycle stretching back over 500,000 years. Green Sahara episodes have recurred roughly 20,000 years across at least 620,000 years of history, all driven by the same orbital wobble. There's even a feedback effect built in. Less dust in the air lets sunlight reach the ground differently, amplifying monsoon rainfall by an estimated 30% beyond what the orbital shift alone would cause. Here's the catch: the Sahara will almost certainly turn green again, but the orbital schedule puts that roughly 12,000 years from now, and whether human activity could meaningfully shift that timeline isn't settled science either. There's no written record of any of this. No names, no language, nothing self-described. Just 15,000 pieces of rock art, layers of ancient sediment, and 2 mummies whose lineage has no confirmed descendants alive today. The desert keeps the answer somewhere in the sediment. What do you think? Did the Sahara die, or did it wait? Leave it below.